This will be a continuation of the tiling textures inside a ZBrush series, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at how we can take one brick, sculpt it really super high res, actually put color on it, and then we can use a setup with Maya to rearrange those bricks to make sure that it actually tiles inside of ZBrush. Then we can use ZBrush's rendering functionality and render these different passes out for color, ambient occlusion, the shading, depth, and then you'll be able to compile those together inside of Photoshop to get your final texture. So what we're looking at here inside of ZBrush is the result of all the work that's been completed. And just like what we looked at in the earlier videos, if we go and take a look at the width and height of this one, actually rendered this out at 2048 by 2048. And I think if we look at this in actual pixels, it's going to be pretty large. If we do AA half, you can see we can see most of this this layout here pretty easily, or we could zoom out to see the entire thing all at one time. So that's how that was set up with this. Let's go and take a look at the geometry that we have inside of Maya. So the whole thing is these bricks actually started off as something very simple like what you see here inside of Maya. So this pattern was just taking one brick and then maybe turning it on its side here for this one, and then we've got these bricks here where basically if we look at this, this is the area of our tiling texture right here. So since this brick moved halfway off the canvas over here, it needs to reappear halfway on the canvas here. So we just make a duplicate of this brick here and then offset it and put it over here like this. So we've done the same thing for this one here. Now what might not be obvious about these different brick shapes that we're looking at inside of Maya is that there's obviously a front, a back, a top, a bottom, and a left and a right. And we've got different orientations for these different bricks. So you can see the numbers on here for this one. It might look like the same brick as we click on it, but if we look at the rotation, we've rotated it quite a bit in different ways to get this to show up to where maybe this is the front of the brick and maybe this is the back of the brick or the top or something like that. So we're giving different rotation values on these things, and that's pretty easy. You can just put it on your rotate tool, and if you hold down J, you could rotate this thing into a different orientation. And then the J actually constrains the rotation to 15-degree increments, and then it's really easy to get a 90-degree rotation and then move this thing, hold down X to turn on the grid snapping, and then at that point you could just snap into place like that. So that's how these things were arranged to get the different patterns that you have, and then each one of these was exported out as an OBJ. Now I did want to point out that I found a tool that makes exporting out many OBJs a lot easier, because normally you have to just select one, you have to go to edit, no sorry not edit, file export selection, go to the OBJ exporter, and then export out one at a time. If you export multiple pieces at a time, like selecting them and exporting this, it'll export it as one big giant object. So I found a script for that, and if you want to find it, you can find it on my Pinterest board. I actually made a Pinterest board where if I scroll down towards the bottom, there is a tools and resources area. So if we click on that, that's going to open up this thing here, and there's a bunch of different tools in here. The thing you're looking for there is this mass OBJ exporter that we see here. So if you just click on that, it'll tell you where it exists at, and you can get this from the Creative Crash. And if we go there, you have to make an account to be able to log in to download things, but there's enough scripts on there that you should really make a make yourself a user of this account so you can download some different things from here. So I just downloaded that, and basically all it is a Python script, and here's what it looks like after you download it and extract it. And you can just open it up in the text editor, select all the text, copy it like this, and then if we go back into Maya and go to the script editor and load this thing up, there should be a Python tab. If you don't see that, I think we can just say new tab, and you can say Python, and that'll open that up. and then you can just paste this thing in here. And then once you select all your different pieces like this, you can select all your text, Control A to select all, and then Control Enter to run this thing. So once you do that, it's going to pull up this dialog box where you can actually browse for a directory that you want to export all your pieces to, and then just say export selected into that directory, and then you'll have all your OBJs exported out, and I believe it just takes the name of whatever that thing is and makes it a .obj. And so that's how it gets the naming convention for everything. I made life simple on myself, so I named my first brick block _001, and then if I duplicate it, Maya automatically numbers that 2, 3, 4, and so on all the way down. So that's how all the pieces were made. And then if we go back into ZBrush, I've got one of these blocks to where they've been cloned like this. So this is what one of my blocks looked like when I was sculpting on it, like this here. So I'll just go ahead and turn off the poly paint for that on there, and just push this up a little bit so you can see what this thing looks like. So obviously I wanted this thing to be visually interesting from each side, and I wanted each side to look a little bit different from one another. So just spend a little bit of time sculpting this thing out. And again, I took just one brick that we had inside of Maya and brought it in here. And if I drop it down to the low subdivision level, hitting Shift D, turn on the poly frame, you can see this is one of our bricks. Now it's kind of tore up a little bit because you know, the sculpting process. So if I hit D to go all the way up on this thing here, like that, and turn off poly frame, that's how we were able to get our brick. So basically what I did was, I'll drop this back down, Shift D, and however many blocks we had, I think we had like 17. After I had one made, then I could just duplicate that thing within here 17 times or so, like this, and I'll put it on solo. And all I have to do to get the new position that I had for Maya was go and say import, and I would import over the top of that object at the lowest subdivision level. So if I went here to OBJ, and you can see there we've got this blocks version 1 layout that I made, and here's all the different blocks. And if I click on this block 01, it might not move it. So that's maybe the position that I was in before. If I go block 02 like that, you can see how it's moving it into a new position like that. So let's go here, and I'll say import block 01. This one I'll import block 02. This one import block 03 like this, and I'll take it off solo so we can start to see that we've got some of this going on here. So I'll import this one. I think this was block 04 like that, and I'm just gonna get rid of the rest of these just because I just want to show you guys this as an example like this. So I'm getting rid of these, and one more. Okay, two more like this. And now all I have to do is hit D to step up in my subdivision levels, and it's taken that block that I have and it's put it in the new position in that orientation what we had from Maya, but I've got all the sculptural detail that I had from ZBrush, right? And I turned off the poly paint on this. We can turn on and off poly paint by just clicking on this thing here and taking a look at it. So now I got that brick that I spent a lot of time working on, and I've got this really high quality look to it, and I've got it positioned correctly to make a tiling pattern for myself. Let's hop back on over here real quick and look at the final results again of all this. And when we're zoomed out, you can see here's this pattern that we have, and if we look from the side, it's going to be all kind of messed up, but all we really need is this part here that's zoomed in. There's another thing that I made for myself, and it's this block that you see here, and I'm going to put this on solo so you can't see anything else. So it was just a block that is the same size as our entire repeating texture area. Why I did this was because if we take it off perspective, and if our canvas is square like this, and if I tap F and tap F again, it's going to fill the entire canvas with this big large block that we see here. So now I can use this as a way to get a camera position that I'm going to use for rendering. So I'm going to go under Document, open up the ZBrush properties, and I can just click this top button to store a camera view for this, and then save that. And then every time I load my project, I can always get that camera view back. But you know, that's just something to do to save the camera view. If you have this block that you see here that I have, it's not going to be a big deal to get back to that area where you can render. And so once that's set up, then I can take that off of solo, and I can go back to this brick that you see up here. And I had everything visible except for that last one here, so I just don't want that cutting into anything. So that gives me my view. Make sure you don't have perspective on, because if you do, you can see what happens here. It starts to go past the canvas here. So you need to turn perspective off and turn it into an orthographic camera. And then now you're ready to render. So I'm just going to take the rendering tab and dock this thing over right here like this. And let's talk about the render property. So all I did was turn on shadows. You don't have to have that on, but I turned that on, and also turn on ambient occlusion. So here is the settings that I use for rendering the shadows. You can see I've got a raise of 1, resolution is 4096, this angle is 30, blur of 10, and V-depth -4, which cranks up the contrast on the shadows that it makes, so it doesn't make the shadows so muddy. And then if we look at the AO, you can see here's the settings that I use for rendering out the AO. And so I'll just hit Shift R, or you can hit this best possible render button right here. And because it's rendering fairly large, it does take a little bit of time to render this thing out. And when we're done, we're going to be able to go and take a look at these different render passes, and then kick that out, and then go into Photoshop with this stuff. So here's the final render results inside of ZBrush here. And if we take a look at these different render passes, and we hover over here, you can see we get the shaded version. Here's the depth that it rendered out from the distance from the camera. So whatever bricks were raised up a bit were rendered a little bit higher than the other bricks. And then we've got our shadow pass, and then we've got AO, and we don't really need anything for a mask because we should be filling up the entire area. But it's super easy to kick these things out. All you got to do is click on the image itself, and it's going to ask you where do you want to save these things out to. So I saved them all out into a folder and just went through for each one and clicked on them, exported them out, and then combined everything together inside of Photoshop. So you can see here, here's the final color map that I have put together. And if we open this up, you can see I used the different rendering passes and blended them together, and actually added a few different repeating textures inside of Photoshop just to add some extra detail in here. But you can see we get a very high resolution map out of this thing, and the quality is pretty nice for it. Now all this stuff here is extra stuff that I added on top of the ZBrush render inside of Photoshop. And so you can see I've just added a little bit of coloring differences, and just what I'm considering a little bit of a grime pass and another grime pass for that, and then changing some of the levels and things like that. So you just have your full tool set inside of Photoshop to keep pushing on this and try to make the texture even better. And in an earlier video, we looked at how to do this very similar process with TilingTextures and ZBrush. And so if you want to look at how to render things out and get it into Photoshop and everything, there's more information on that. And we also looked at how to kick out a normal map, and then also how to just make a spec map out of the color map. So that's how all these different maps were made, like that. And I made different versions of layouts inside of Maya, and then pushed all those different layouts inside of ZBrush and render those out. So if I open up these different passes that I have, let me open this one, and we'll put them next to each other so you can see I was trying to get some different looks out of this same technique, and I was using mainly the same brick for this. I did some sculptural differences on the bricks and things like that, so you can see there's a little bit of differences where let me open up this one right here so you can see this one like that. And maybe the bricks are just even colored a little bit different in each one of these projects. So there's just slight variations on these. And the way that they're set up is you would be able to maybe kind of mix and match some different areas and maybe blend them together. So with these three textures, you could generate even more textures out of these three combinations that you have. On this one, I wanted to do some grout in between each one. So I actually put, you remember that big giant block that was back there? I divided that thing and actually sculpted on this, and then I took these different bricks that you see here and I scaled them down just a little bit to give a little bit more space on there. The areas that you got to watch out for is anytime like this brick tiles across here, you still have to account for that thing going across the middle of that thing correctly. But other than that, it was pretty easy to set these things up, and you can see if we hit Control A, I'm going to do Control Shift C to copy merged. I'll do Control N to do a new document, and I'll hit OK. I'll paste that in there like this, and you could always test and make sure that the tiling is working through going through filter, other, and then go to offset like this, and so you can keep kind of pushing this thing around. And so I didn't even realize that it looks like there might be an issue with this thing. So let's go 100% and then go filter, other, offset. Yeah, so I actually need to go through this document and I need to fix up this little bit of seaming issue like this. So we looked at how to clean that stuff up in the last video series. It's pretty simple. So basically I'll close this one here, and if we went to the color area, I would just go ahead and paste this copy merged in top of there. So maybe just call this like flat, and then do filter, other, offset again, and this time I'll do 1024 by 1024 because our document, if you remember, was 2048 by 2048 inside of ZBrush. So once I've got that, then I can make a marquee selection and just say fixed size, and I'll do a width of 2048 and a height of, we'll do 3 pixels like what we did that last time, and I'll just zoom in like this. Just click and drag this selection that I made with the marquee, and that's happening because we got that width at the full document width, and the height is 3 pixels. And now I can put it on the move tool, hold down Alt and tap the up arrow key like that to get rid of that. And it doesn't have the best look on there because we've got some softening of a shadow there. Maybe I could just take this here where there's a blur tool and just kind of slightly run it over there, not be too aggressive with it, just to kind of soften that edge just a little bit like that. And then I need to do the same thing for this line here, so I'll just tap M to put on the marquee tool, and then I can use this little arrow to switch the width and the height, and then I can just click that there, put it back on the move tool, hold down Alt, use the arrow keys like that, and I think that one's quite a bit less noticeable. Yeah. Okay. And as I zoom out on this thing, I can definitely tell this harsh edge that we have here. So maybe just do a little bit more cleanup work on that. Just blur it a little bit more through there. Okay, and when that's done, then we can just go back to filter and do the other offset and put it back to where it was at, and then we can just save that document and we should be good to go for that. So you want to check that on, you know, both the color, the norm, and the spec, because you don't want to spend all this time making a tiling texture and then have a little bit of seam on there and ruin the entire effect for that. But that's how you can work together with Maya, and working with Maya with ZBrush with a really high resolution sculpt for a particular like brick or something to that degree that's going to be tiling, and use those in combination together to build a really high quality map that you can use inside of your game engine or a pre-rendered sequence that you're going to be doing.